Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming, those are here, and thank you for inviting me to this conference today. I'm going to talk about sustainability beyond energy efficiency. I'm going to try to show you different ways of saving energy away from a traditional approach that normally focuses on active systems, and how that relates to health and well-being, healthy buildings, and ultimately with a newly appeared WELL certification. Just to give you a bit of a background of where we are. Doesn't work. But this is the temperature. How is it raising? It's been raising in the last century or so. We've been experiencing more than 1 degree temperature increase. We're hitting almost 1.5 degree temperature increase average across the globe. And the bad news is that this is not stopping. We hit a very important milestone 4 years ago with the COP21 summit. It seems that we solved the problem, but nothing has happened since. They were targeting no more than 2 degrees temperature increase by the end of the century. We are already on 1.6, and the trend indicates that we're going to hit almost 3.3 degrees average across the globe. This means that there are some spaces that they're going to experience increase of more than 6, 7, almost 10 degrees. The consequences on sea levels, on local climate, is completely disastrous. So we keep on talking about this, but nothing seems to happen. If we have a look at how the energy is being used across Europe, that was taken from the Eurostat, we can see that 40% of the energy is being used in buildings. So the building is by far the largest consumer in Europe. And if we have a look at how energy is being used within buildings itself, we can see that 60% of the energy in buildings is somehow related to heating, cooling, fans, and pumps. Meaning that 60% of that 40%, meaning 24% of your raw energy in the EU, is being used to keep temperature within spaces. It's being used to keep people comfortable and happy. So we're using energy just to keep temperature in buildings. To show you if that approach is right or wrong, I bring a real case that happened to us a client of us. They were complaining, their occupants, the occupants in their buildings, they were complaining about they were discomfortable. Didn't know the reason. We went there and we installed air quality sensors, and we realized that the air was very dry. It was humidity was well below 30 degrees C. 30% RH. So this is something on the slide. Yeah. But we couldn't get complaints. We didn't get complaints from people being too cold. Normally, you experience if the air is very dry, it's because it's being cooled down too much in the cooling coils, and people will complain about being cold or the air or feeling drafty, but nobody complained about that. Conclusion was that the AHUs and the fan coils, they were reheating back the air to a reasonable temperature. So the energy was wasted somehow to keep people happy, because the building wasn't properly set up, it wasn't properly commissioned, and we could find out that, obviously we knew this, but normally inefficient buildings are not capable of providing comfortable environment. And on the contrary, if a building is keeping people busy and efficient in trying to keep people happy, in a building that is not properly commissioned, it consumes a lot of energy. That's in relation just to temperature, but if we go to air quality, we could see this happening. Cities are polluting. The air in cities is not healthy. In order to keep indoor air at a good quality, we need to install filters. If we need to install filters, high quality filters, we're consuming more energy in fans, for example. We're consuming more energy in fans, we're polluting the environment, and we're creating polluted cities. And that circle continues all the time. So we got a problem with temperature, we got a problem with air quality. Are we talking that healthy buildings and people happiness in buildings is opposite to a healthy planet? We believe it's not. We believe it's actually the opposite. And we can bring an opposite example. What if we, for example, take cars out of the streets? Okay, we're creating cleaner streets. We're creating streets with cleaner air, with less noise. And what if we bring plants inside buildings and around buildings? Those plants are capable of actually filtering the air. And maybe we can create an opposite cycle. Okay, a reduced pollution city, more friendly city. Maybe we are able to ventilate the buildings naturally just by opening the windows. If we bring plants inside that can also purify the air somehow, we will decrease the fan power associated to ventilation. And if we decrease fan power, then obviously we're reducing the power demand, we're polluting less cities, and we're creating a better city. And we can start that cycle again, but in a positive way. So there's other ways of doing things away from what we've been doing so far. Not for doing something for a long time, it means that we've done it right. And if we look at what comfort means in terms of temperature, and that's related really to that real case I brought earlier, what happened? Traditionally, thermal comfort has been approached, and we can see this in ASHRAE 55 guide. Air-conditioned buildings it's got very strict indoor conditions. People within those buildings, they're expecting those conditions in place. If they don't get it, they complain. They don't feel happy. If we look at that purple area, that defines, for example, comfortable conditions in summer mode. And we can see that there is a series of variables like air temperature, radiant temperature, air velocity, humidity, metabolic rate, and clothing level. So if you fall with that purple area, then you're fine. If you look at summer conditions, and I just intentionally put the red point in the limit, we can see that in order to be comfortable, we need to be well below 23 degrees C, which is a temperature that we all normally manage in our heads. And if we are in winter, then we're talking about maybe 22 degrees, 21 degrees, if anything. But in any case, the temperature band for comfortable conditions is very narrow, meaning that a building will consume a lot of energy to keep the temperature in that range, and if for whatever reason the building is not performing right, it's going to spend and waste a lot of energy unnecessarily. So maybe we need to start thinking about changing the way we identify comfort. If we go to adaptive comfort approach, we could maybe relax the comfort criteria. In this example I brought, for the same radiant temperature, we can achieve comfortable conditions at 29 degrees C. And the reason being is that, if you educate people in a way that they can expect the building to maintain certain conditions, that the building won't be looked after them, that people might feel comfortable in a different way. If you come in, for example, you're in a Mediterranean climate here, a day like today, it's about 28 degrees outside maybe. We don't need to have 22 degrees inside in order to keep comfortable. Maybe the only thing we need to do is just dress accordingly, according to how we behave outside. Or maybe if it's a bit too hot, or if it's just a little bit too hot, maybe we need to increase the air velocity a little bit. And we increase it to maybe 0.3 meters a second as opposed to 0.1 meters a second. So having a fan in the ceiling would be sufficient. So, you know, we're getting the same goal, which is keeping people happy, but we're consuming much less energy. And if we look in winter conditions, it's exactly the opposite. We can be comfortable at 19 degrees. We don't need to heat the space to 22 degrees. We don't need it. We're coming from outside, which is 10, 12 degrees, you know, outside. We're wearing a jumper. We can wear a jumper inside. It's just education and how people, you know, it's how people behave in the space. And maybe we need to start thinking in a different way. And as I said, if we increase the comfort band, we reduce the energy consumption a lot. And when talking about thermal comfort, we're just not talking about the actual temperature, but there's many other things that could be, that has to be considered. For example, we're talking about air temperature, but we're not talking about excessive radiant gain. So we need to be looking at buildings in a different way. Maybe we need to provide some shelter from the sun, some internal blind. Maybe we're lacking of air movement. We need to increase that by having fans in the ceiling or having local fans in your workstation. That will keep you comfortable. Also, tackling dress code. That's something that is long discussed. You know, why would you need to wear a suit in an environment that, you know, can that be avoided? That will save energy as well. And if we go to winter, we get the opposite. Maybe we get a space that is too drafty, or you got cold feet. It doesn't matter how hot you are, how hot the temperature is in the space. If you got cold feet, you feel cold. And you're wasting energy, and you don't get comfortable condition. And I would also highlight the fact that, you know, comfort is a subjective issue. People feel more comfortable when they can control the environment. So people want to control the temperature. And for those of you that you know in an office with a lot of people, you realize that this is never possible. People just fighting about thermostat. Who manages the thermostat is the person who owns the space. And it doesn't matter how, you know, the temperature in the space, you are unsatisfied. So there's many other aspects that we don't pay attention to that could save loads of energy. And we just talked about temperature, but is that all what matters? So what do occupants want? And I think this is I'm linking here with the well-being of occupants, and I'm bringing a research report that been put together by people of Savills recently in summer, this summer. And you can find that in their web, what worker wants in Europe. And this is a most important factor for choosing specific working environment. And the answers, you know, is commuting to work. How long does it take for me to go from home to work? That's the main worry about, you know, of people. Do I have Wi-Fi in my working area? You know, is that quiet enough? I'm gonna get mobile signal. You know, things like public transport access, internal design. You know, how could design the spaces, you know, breakout spaces, amenities. A lot of things are subjective and they're not tangible. There's a lot of things like this, and this is what people are really, you know, they're interested about. And when they talk about the important factors in your ideal workspace, you can see the answers: cleanliness, comfort, lighting, air quality, noise levels. Temperature is there. It's not the top factor. It's one of the factors, but it's not the most important one. Smell, security. So people are worried about many other aspects, just beyond just temperature. And if you make that question in the opposite way, what's the most important factor for dissatisfaction? Temperature is not the top one either. Is it quiet? Is it noisy? Is the air quality good enough? They talk about, again, commuting. So people are concerned about many other things. They don't want this office anymore. They don't want an office that is 22 degrees all year round, and if it doesn't get to 22 degrees, I lift my hand, I complain, and someone is going to put 22 degrees there, regardless whether the building is efficient or inefficient, it's possible or not. They just want you to avoid any complaints. So people actually don't want this model anymore. They want that. They want flexible spaces. They want to manage their environment. They want to move around. They want to find a quiet place to work. If I don't get 22 degrees C here, maybe I don't need it. Maybe I can be perfectly happy if I sit down there and relax a little bit just while working. I might not need that much rigidity in the temperature control. I want a quiet space. I want to concentrate. I want to be focused. I want some privacy. I want to make some phone calls without having anyone around. So these are the type of things that we should be focusing more than just temperature. And these are what people want. People want wellness. They want health. They want activity. They want to keep, healthier. They're looking at better quality of life. So designing buildings maybe should be done in a different way. We should put people in the center. We should try and start talking about human-centric design and asking what do people want, rather than give them what we think they want. It's something completely different. Because the reason is that we really spend most of our life indoors. 90% of our time is indoors. And the conditions that are achieved inside really affects our health and our life. And if we move away from the actual, let's say, let's gonna do this because this is what we think, well, we don't know whether this is actually feasible, whether it's gonna make economic sense, because we all know that business is business, and when someone purchases a building, they want something back. And when a company employs someone, they want something back. We shouldn't forget that. But if we look at the breakdown of the cost for any company, we can see that the biggest cost is people. Energy is just 1% of the bottom line. 90% is salaries. Anything we can do to improve the conditions of the people is going to have a much bigger return in that company's account than if they were focusing on energy efficiency. I'm not saying in any moment that we shouldn't be forgetting about one thing. All I'm saying is that we might have to start focusing on something different. There's been a lot of reports talking about, health and well-being, healthy spaces, how that can, affect productivity, happiness, increasing in sales for retail spaces. It's all related. Recovery time in hospitals. So there's been a lot of, studies being done. World Rebuilding Council, UK, in Spain, in many areas. They found that actually, healthy places are better for people. If we go to, say, talk about productivity again is something that it's a tangible concept, but it's very subjective in a way that it could be understood, because there's nothing scientific about productivity. We've somehow tried, and we've been doing this as a pilot studies for certain clients. We try to identify factors that affect productivity thermal quality, noise, CO2 levels, VOC content, views to outside, daylight, visual quality. And we put that into simulation tools, and we've managed to identify the predicted productivity loss, and even compare against different options of facade, for example. One facade will give you more daylight, but on the opposite, it will give you more radiant heat. So how all that relates and balance out? Okay, so this has been developed, and this has been developed, and it's actually active. We see this happening across our clients. And out of this trend, there is, it's not here. The image is not great. You can see that there's no people in there, some people are missing. Anyway, there's a new standard. It's a well-building standard. And well-building standard is, for those who are familiar with LEED or BREEAM, I don't know how many of you are familiar with those tools. It's a similar approach. It's a certification tool that's been managed by a third party that ensures a certain degree of quality. The reason, or the main difference between LEED and BREEAM and WELL is that the well-building standard only focuses on people, only focuses on health and well-being. We knew that LEED talks about transport, it talks about carbon footprint, it talks about energy performance, and environmental quality. That's a little bit. Well, it's an expansion of that section, and it only deals with things that affects the health of the occupants. And it had, the tool is very clever. It's been put together in a clever way because it relates every credit or every section with a specific body function. So, for example, on the diet section, they talk about your cardiovascular system, about your endocrine system, so on and so forth. Fitness area, about muscular, and so on. So the whole thing is being put together by researchers and by people that actually make some, they put a lot of knowledge into this. The tool is divided into, as we see, in 7 sections, divided in air, water, nourishment, light, fitness, comfort, and mind. And it's being handled in a very similar way to LEED. The other new thing, and I think it's an advantage, is that for those who have managed a LEED project or a BREEAM project, they will know that you look after the design in a certain way. You provide some evidence during the design, you provide evidence during the construction. Then once the building is handed over, the certification finishes. So nobody will care whether the building is actually doing what it's supposed to be doing. They just have a label that says this building has been certified. The difference with WELL is that WELL is tested, commissioned, and monitored across the life of the project and across the life of the building. So you provide the evidence at the beginning, you monitor the construction, then someone independent that is from the certification body comes to your building and it actually tests that the air quality is correct, that the water quality is correct, and that all the things that you are told that the building will achieve is actually being achieved. And moreover, over the life of the certification, every 3 years, you have to go back and get yourself recertified. Otherwise, you lose the certification. And in order to get your, your recertification process, you need to provide evidence that everything has been done over 3 years. So you've got regular checks on the air, you've got regular checks on the water, You're providing the right, measures to your occupants. And I'm going to briefly touch on each of the sections. So I'm going to touch briefly on air, water, and so on and so forth, so you can see what actually, what well deals with. The first category is the air quality. Normally well projects are what uses harmless elements. So it uses no VOC paints and finishes and coatings with no VOCs. For example, when you go to a car, those who has bought a new car, they will identify that smell new in a car. You might think that that's good, but actually that's really bad. Although that smell is actually VOC elements being released and being gassed off from the surface. Same like when you go to place the paint, everything that smells as new, that's a very bad smell for you. So well projects are not like this. Someone said, yeah, I understand it, because if I can eat it, I can install it. That was one of the responses that we're giving back. One of our contractors, when we're doing our first stuff, we have our headquarters in London has been well certified. It was the first well project in Europe, and the contractor didn't know about all this. We were specifying VOC-free paints. They didn't know what we're talking about. It was hard for them to get educated. But we managed to get it through, and they managed to understand it, and actually the market is ready for this, even though we don't know. So it's just, taking a little bit of extra care in specifying the right material and making sure that the contractor is actually installing it as specified. But also there's other ways of purifying air. We can include vegetation in the space. And you say, yeah, but my space is not, it's not so bright. I'm not going to put plants inside, an atrium. Why not? There's a plant for every condition. You can see that, there are plants from 350 to 1700 lux. There are plants for bright space, and there are plants for very bright space. There is a very interesting study from the NASA, in which they identify plants to be taken in the spaceship, because they purify the air. So there's a good way of doing all this. And again, we're not adding any energy into the building. We're just avoiding the need for mechanical ventilation in certain occasions, in certain applications. But the most important thing as well is that the well standard makes you monitor the air quality in the space. This is actually a live, well, not live, it's a real screenshot of one of our offices. I don't know where I can see it there. You can choose between different variables of air quality. You can choose the temperature, humidity, CO2, VOC, noise, daylight. That equipment, it only costs 150 euros. Okay, but it gives you a lot of information. We certified, or in a process of finishing a certification in Barcelona, and we installed VOC-free paints. We installed many amenities in the space. It all looked fine, and when they came and did the test, it was failing the VOCs. And we didn't know why, because we purged the air, we opened all the windows, we did everything, we ventilated the space, and we failed the test. And we were monitoring the VOC context across during the time, during a week or so. We purged the space again, and we found that when we opened the windows, the thing improved, but then again it came back bad. And we realized, after doing a lot of research and talking to the maintenance people, that there were some people there doing some refurbishment in the space, and they were varnishing something. So, it doesn't matter how well you do this. If you don't monitor, you don't realize that you're actually doing something wrong. And the environment you might think is the best place, and you spend a lot of money in all this equipment, and you're doing things wrong because you don't know that you're doing wrong. And the same with the water. We all think the water quality from the tap is fine. Sometimes it is not fine. You know, maybe the flavor is good, but then the water is not fine again. We have to install that filter. That filter is this height in our office in London. Because we thought that the water quality was good, and we did the test, and it was nickel and ASHRAE, too high. That's not really, I mean, the water wasn't really healthy. It was good to drink, but in the long term, it wasn't healthy enough. And when it's actually promoting that you do a test, then you take remedial action if there's something wrong, and more importantly, that you continue monitoring the water quality across the time of in the life of the product. They look at organic contaminants or metal, chlorines, many things. They make you change the way you treat or you clean the deposits and everything. And sometimes you might think that something is okay, but if you measure it, you don't realize that it's not. Next thing that well deals with is nourishment. So it's promoting healthy eating for the occupants. It's promoting good eating habits. With the Mediterranean, we are we're lucky. We got good culture of healthy eating, but there are other countries that has less lucky than we are. It makes you have a space for dining areas for the staff. When people eat together, they eat healthier than when they eat alone. That also creates it's a good culture and networking. It keeps people healthy, right? It keeps people happy in some ways because they talk to their peers. If the company is providing food to the staff, it needs to be healthy. The allergies needs to be reported. If you have vending machine, you need to move away from having these chocolate bars and all this sugar or these soft drinks and all that. So you need to have healthy choices in your vending machine. So in other words, you take whatever is there. If nobody has put you a healthy option, there's nothing you could do really. I mean, here you're lucky, you can go out, go something for lunch, but you're in the middle of an industrial state, and the only eating that you're having in the day is the food that's been provided by the company. Then you've got a problem if that food is not healthy. Next thing that is done by well is lighting design, and that's very interesting because it was found that spaces that has access to natural light and good daylight as well, the sleeping pattern improved by 46%. So basically, people that stay in a space with windows, they sleep better at times. That's because the body clock works. And there is something called circadian rhythm, some of you might know. And that's actually, this is a response of the body to different light waves. So when you wake up in the morning and then you start seeing light, your body starts releasing cortisol. And cortisol is a hormone that keeps you awake, keeps you under stress, keeps you active and alert. And that is triggered by light. And as the day progresses, the daylight, the light temperature, the color of the light also changes. It goes brighter to the midday. This is when you're peaking. Your cortisol level is at peak. Then from that point on, then you start dropping. Then it becomes, you reach to a point where your melatonin, which is the hormone that puts you to sleep, start triggering. And both hormones are exactly follow an opposite path. And the melatonin levels are triggered by soft light. And I mean, Well has been looking into this, but we've been doing this forever. You know, what you do at home, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the evening, put the light, get down, get your soft light, then you start telling your body, I'm gonna go to sleep. The people are saying now, people with taking the tablets to the bed just to watch the telly, that's really bad for your sleep, because telling your body with a bright light, hold on, it's no time to sleep yet, especially with kids as well. This is something that is really affecting kids' performance at school. But as I said, now Well has identified this factor, and projects are, they're just looking into this more detail. The main lighting manufacturers, they got LED lighting system that could control the light temperature throughout the day. And this, together with good daylight access, with a good facade arrangement, that's obviously going to improve things massively. But as we said, Well is also trying to keep healthy habits to people, and they're looking after their fitness as well. An easy thing like having a big, beautiful staircase in the center of a space. That's making people going up and down the stairs, I don't know how many times a day. This is actually our office in Birmingham that was also LEED certified. And the reason, you could think about a different strategy. Just take away that stair and put 2 lifts in there. What would people use? People would use a lift. They would walk. But if you moving the lift out of the scene, then everyone is encouraged to use a stair. And also if the stair is beautiful, then you would like to also be close to that thing. But also, having spaces for multi-purpose spaces for practicing yoga, for example, or having some fitness lessons in there. Having showers in buildings, public buildings, offices, so people could cycle to work. They could go out in lunchtime for a run and then back. That's keeping people active. One of my clients, they're refurbishing the building and they're installing 2 paddle tennis courts in the grounds of the building. So one thing is, that's actually, some people might not, you might think, is that really needed? When it's there, you actually use it. And when you realize that someone else is doing it, you want that too. So you want to be in a space where, there's nothing around, there's no amenities. You want, in order to keep you happy, to keep you, you're in a good condition, there's many things you could do. Also, give vouchers to people so they can join gym, for example, offering discounts or subsidizing some of these activities. Comfort, we discussed about comfort, okay? But Well treats comfort it's just a section of Well. Comfort is not the most important thing for Well. It's important, but it's not the most important. At least thermal comfort. Acoustic comfort, we say, was the main source of discomfort. I mean, the lack of bad acoustic treatment in space, it was the main source of discomfort. The solution now that provides quiet space, that provides, you can keep focus on these spaces, you can keep focus on an open plan space without having too much noise around. You can have a meeting room with by simple things. You could reduce the reverberation time, reverberation effect in a meeting room. So all that matters. Having one of these noise elements that is providing you, with stopping you from hearing your person in the next desk. Okay. But more important than achieving certain temperature, as we said before, It's actually being able to adapt or being able to change the environment to your needs. Having a fan in the ceiling, it could help you go through a hot moment. You know, maybe the temperature is not achieved in the building for whatever reason. Maybe just turn the fan on because some breeze, you feel okay. Maybe someone is actually needing to be, say for example, there's two people in an office, and that's very common. One feels hot and the other one feels cold. And there's also, a fight, women and men. They all feel differently. Metabolism rate is different, males and females. So you can set temperature for one, and then you can adapt your local needs by other means. Okay, so it doesn't need to be have a set point for each one. Okay, radiant elements to prevent cold feet. You can have radiant, small radiant things. If you have your local radiant next to the window, for example, you prevent cold feet. You don't need to lower the temperature that much. People in the inside of the building won't feel hot. They won't feel hot at all in winter. There's a lot of people in offices feeling hot. And there are some offices that you actually need to heat the space, heat the perimeter, and cool the inside. Because, there's no heat losses in the facade. Sorry, there's heat losses in the facade. But having spaces that allows you to move around. So now you're in an active position, you're standing up, you might need some temperature. But then, after lunch, for example, you're quieter, your metabolism is different. You might need something else. You might need to sit down on a sofa, more relaxed way. It doesn't mean that you're not going to do the work. You do it in a different way. And somehow try to avoid that work of the thermostat that we see in every office environment. And last but not least, is a degree of well deals with also mind of occupants. So it's making people feel. Sometimes people say, "You're feeling okay?" "Oh yeah, I feel okay." People don't realize they're feeling bad until they actually feel wrong. This is like comfort. People don't feel comfort. They feel that they are uncomfortable. So it's only when this is not achieved that people actually complain. And with the mind, it's the same thing. When you're okay, you're actually not thinking that, I'm very well today. No? When you say, I have a hard day, or I'm feeling crap, I cannot keep up. And well also relates that with nature, with access to nature, with beauty. They encourage that some art design and so on is included across the spaces. And obviously biophilia. It's a direct link between people and nature. So when you want to feel well, you go to the countryside. When you want to disconnect from your routine, from your stress, you go to the countryside. There's a reason for that. You want to go back to the origin. Bringing plants into the space, bringing natural materials to the space, bringing water to the space, noise of water to the space. All that is making people happier. And also you can even benefit from having those plants in there. For example, the picture in the middle, this is a test that we were running, and that's a live, we call it a live wall. Okay, it's an element that has, the plant has exposed roots, and we're making the air, it's recirculating the air, and it's being supplied across that, different shells in there. So the leaves in a plant is what produces oxygen, but the roots are the elements that actually filter the contaminants. So unless you have the roots exposed, the VOCs and all that doesn't get filtered. So you can kill two birds with the same stone. You can have natural elements, you can have plants, and also you can have active elements that filters the air and again reduces energy needs And people, want to be around, want to be in a building that is surrounded by interesting things. Again, that's acting positively on mind for people, having amenities. This is just that that's a room for breastfeeding, for example. People might feel, actually the company is looking after me. I can bring my kid to the office, breastfeed, and then, move away. There's other ways of doing things away from the traditional. Is there anything in the space, just so go out for lunch and have a quick lunch? Is there a park around? Is there a space by the sea? Can I see the mountains from my window? All that things matter, and all that thing makes people happier. And just to conclude, I think we just covered pretty much everything. And maybe the message is, the buildings are the largest consumers nowadays, definitely across Europe. And most of that energy is to keep people happy, is to keep certain temperature conditions. The only way of maybe, definitely if we relax the thermal condition, we will increase the energy savings. We haven't spent any money in an efficient plant, in the high-tech chiller, in a very in the super fine or anything like that. We just try to change the paradigm, change the base of the design, and try to save energy from that. But we need to give something back to people. We cannot say, listen, okay, nowadays you're coming to a space that is 22 degrees, you're gonna feel okay. Now I'm not gonna give you a space that is 22 degrees, because people are gonna complain. We need to give something back. And that thing that we're giving back is many other things that doesn't consume any energy. A well is actually covering all those topics. And the social and capital return of the investment is huge. We got our own experience with this certification, and we can tell that for our offices in London that has 150 people, it has costed us 300 or 400 euros per person. There is a significant drop in absenteeism, and there's been an increase in productivity. Human resources have done the numbers, and the return of investment on that has been just 4 months. So those things, it's not only good for people, it's also good for companies. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you for your presentation. Regarding your general view on thermal comfort, I think I'm a bit confused.
So relaxing the design criteria in the building, you mentioned that we can increase the temperature in the summer, for example, but you know that thermal comfort is very subjective. So how can you expect from someone to work under, I think you mentioned 29 degrees? Maybe clarification on that, please.
Okay. Let me go back. May I ask you a personal question?
Yeah.
It could be that it's the case, and maybe the argument is wrong. You got air conditioning at home?
Yes.
Everyone has air conditioning at home? Who doesn't have air conditioning at home? Okay. Can you live at home? What do you do when you're at home? You just get your clothes in a way that suits the condition.
It's well insulated.
It's well insulated.
Yeah, but the activity is different.
It's not the same.
The activity is different. Watching telly is different from sitting
Working
down.
under pressure, for example, in a
Well, if you're working under pressure, then that could be a different thing. You might need some space to focus, and that space could be treated differently. But generally, you need to identify whether the same condition is needed for everyone. And not even that, it's also the air quality. If you look at the Indoor Environmental Quality Guide from ASHRAE, is asking you that I think you need to maintain, I'm not moving away from the topic, but I'm trying to give you a different view as well. That guide asks you that you cannot excess 800 ppm parts per million of CO2 in space, because otherwise you start feeling, sleepy and all that. That's not true. Maybe if you need to focus, then you need that quality, but a lot of people don't need that level of air quality. And in order to keep the same level of quality for everyone is what actually is making you consume a lot of energy. But if you have a look at that graph, this is also ASHRAE standard. Moving away. This is also ASHRAE standard. I don't know if I the only difference is that the band is completely different. It's assuming that outside the temperature is 30 degrees. So if you come in a summer day, 30 degrees, you wear short sleeves. If you come into a space that's actually a bit cooler than the outside. So maybe you're 28 and you feel okay. You're also increasing the air velocity up to 0.3 meters a second. So in a traditional way, comfort, assumes that the temperature, the air velocity is only 0.1, 0.12, 0.15 maximum. There's no draft in the space. Why? Because if you have draft, VRV units supplies air at 14 degrees C. If you got draft or a high velocity at 14 degrees C, you definitely feel cold. What do? You just reduce the velocity. But think differently. Why don't you increase the temperature, increase the velocity? Everyone has fans at home. I do have fun. I live in Spain, and I'm from the south. People in Malaga and Seville, not everyone has air conditioning, and it's 40 degrees, but they sit in front of a fan and they feel okay. So maybe you need to think about, you might need to think differently. Why do you need some fixed condition? You might get same comfort level in a different way. And I agree with you. There's some tasks people are feeling very, very, stressed and so on. That's fine. You get the temperature for them, but not for the rest.
According to your experience, in how many areas is it implemented? I mean, you mentioned your company in Birmingham with 150 employees. Do you have any idea how many firms have certified their buildings to well?
Yeah. Well, you said Birmingham, but our first project was in.
I find it a very ideal condition. So I wanted to know how many percentage of the whole buildings is already certified.
If I talk about percentage, it's obviously very little percentage.
Mm-hmm. And what's the strategy of making it bigger?
My experience is, I started because I was in London, and then I moved to Spain in 2007. And in 2007, the LEED was starting in Spain. Okay, now it's been 12 years. Initially, LEED was really slow. Just a few buildings, just landmark building, just 1, 2, 3. But after 5 years or so, it started to accelerate. Nowadays, developers, they don't question whether they need LEED or not. For them, that is not an argument. They think, and they know their business, obviously. It's not how much LEED costs me, it's how much do I lose if I don't have LEED. That's the argument now. Okay? Well started 2-3 years ago. We got a project certified back in 2016. We got 4 offices certified. With the first office, we got a lot of people from the city in London, developers, bankers, insurers, everyone interested. There's been a lot of projects certified. You can go on the net, on the internet. There is on the web page. You can find a directory of projects. In Spain, we're working on 5 projects at the moment, and there are developers, the important ones, that are actually looking at dual certification. So for them, the norm is now to certify under LEED and under WELL.
LEED is another subject. WELL is people-oriented.
Sorry?
WELL, the WELL certification, as far as I understand, is people, occupants oriented.
Exactly.
It has to be, it's more individual. Let's put it this way. Nowadays, when a company needs rooms or offices, they are not going to make an investment for the people they are working there unless they own the building. You know what I mean? It's the same with the residential
No,
buildings as well.
it's not like that. It's not like that because the LEED, WELL also have different, different approaches. You can certify the building from a developer perspective, so you tackle certain credits, okay? Or you can certify that based on the fit out of the project, okay? So, and the credits are different, right? So, and you can certify both. Say, for example, that is a bank headquarters.
It's possible to make
It's possible to take different approaches. Okay, the developer, when the developer certify the buildings under WELL, they enable the building in a way that a tenant can go in there and make the building even better by certifying the fit out. Okay.
As a standard, and from them,
There are two different.
Point on,
there are different approaches. Okay, for developers and for occupants, and each one deals with different credits in a different way. For example, the credit about nourishment. If I'm doing the fit out for for an office, and I'm the employer, I've been asked to put space for eating, for example. And if I'm providing food to my employees, then I'm to provide healthy food to them. But if a developer wants to certify, the nourishment credit comes in a different way. So for example, they are not to put any vending machine, or they might not, the credit will be dealt differently. And the approach is slightly different.
The approach is only for air, water, and...
No, it will cover every aspect.
For the developer.
It will cover every aspect, but it will cover in a different way. Or it will cover certain things, and certain things, they will leave it out.
Last question.
No.
Does it apply to residential
Yes.
buildings as well?
At the moment, residential is being on pilot scheme. So, this has been primarily on tertiary offices, commercial. But it was surprising that I might be wrong, and we can check that anyway in the website. But one of the countries where this it grew a lot was in China. And in China, most of the projects, a lot of the projects were residential. And I went to China, that was about 3 years ago, and I met one person there who used to live there for 6 years, and she told me that they couldn't even take the kids to the park because the air was so polluted that they were afraid of actually taking people away, taking people to the streets. And that's my own belief. And I think the reason for that amount of projects in residential in China is because people might want to have their own space, cage, away from the outside. So yeah, it's applicable to residential, it's applicable to every scheme, it's applicable to retail as well. They've identified that spaces with nature, with open spaces and all that, they sell more. That's studies everywhere, and they all know that. And you go to a shopping center that is isolated, they just want to go away. But if you're in a space, it's open, you get all these nice amenities around, you might want to stay longer. The longer you stay, the more you buy. And the same with hospitals. People are recovering more and quickly in hospital with air quality, with quality views, and so on.
Do you have any other questions?
No.
We don't have much time yet.
I'm the next speaker, so Sorry.
The time. So, two questions from my side. Is this a qualitative based framework, or you quantify specific KPIs in order to validate a building?
Sorry, I didn't get
The question is, you mentioned before that you have a checklist. So there are some criteria that you have to meet, or you quantify specific, let's say, indicators on the way to validate a building based on your methodology.
See if I've understood the question. There is a list of credit. It's not a credit checklist. Okay. There is a credit list that you need to comply. There are certain requirements that are prerequisite, so you've got to comply. If you don't comply those, you don't meet you cannot certify. And you can choose the credits that you want. There's some flexibility.
Okay.
So it's trying to make life easier for also the people, because the first version of WELL, it was really strict. So you couldn't. It's either you got all the credits or you didn't certify. They found that wasn't the right approach, and they left some degrees of flexibility. Okay, and you need to prove that you've complied with the credit requirements. So you tell the team what they need to do. You need to install this. You need to work this way. You need to design the space in a certain way, and then there's the evidence that needs to be provided to the certifiers in order to get the point awarded. I don't know if that's what you...
Yeah, and these criteria that you have as check criteria are yes, no criteria, it's Boolean, or you have specific scales?
You could always achieve a credit in many ways. So as long as you address the intent of the credit. For example, we're having problems in Spain because some regulations are not applicable. This is all American, okay? And American regulations sometimes doesn't apply everywhere. I mean, normally it don't apply everywhere. So the tool somehow adapts to the local things, and if you prove to them, I mean, they're open to conversation, and if you prove to them that you're actually achieving the same thing that what they're proposing, they will give you the point.
Okay.
Okay, so it's some degree of, it's a performance-based,
yes,
more than a prescriptive approach.
And the second question is, once you get certified, this remains forever, or you have to do the process?
No, it lasts for 3 years, and that's the good thing about WELL, is that you cannot forget about this. Some credits ask you for ongoing tests, water, ongoing air monitoring, and if something goes wrong with the ventilation system, then you need to also have plans of remediation, what you do in case something goes wrong. So having that record, I mean, this lasts for 3 years, okay? So during those 3 years, you need to have all the records, and something could go wrong, you get your AC that fails. Nobody's going to take the certification away because the AC failed. But you need to have in place a plan and a contingency plan when that happens, okay? And all that paperwork is what needs to be given to them after 3 years in order to renew the certification.
Thank you.